So I'll be talking about our digital showcase platform, Ibali, which is powered by Omeka S. My name is Sanjin, coming to you from the University of Cape Town. I've scheduled this session into 3 different parts. I'm going to give you an intro into who we are and what we're trying to do with our platform and some of the modules that we've used. Before I'll present some of the challenges, and I guess they're slightly more, I would say, philosophical or meta challenges in trying to create dialogue and also working with linked open data, or more specifically, the semantic web, before just wrapping it all up. All right, so let's give you a little bit of introduction. So for those of you who might not know, the University of Cape Town is found in Cape Town. We are at the southernmost tip of Africa, so all the way at the bottom or at the top, depending on your perspective. We've got about 30,000 students and 5,000 staff working on it, and we are ranked slightly higher up in terms of the African continent and the 77th worldwide, according to a recent ranking. Where I work is within a small team within the libraries, which is the Digital Library Services team. A lot of the stuff that we do is, of course, linked towards participating in open science, which is the aim of the university. And I guess for my presentation today, out of all the different things that we do, I'm highlighting specifically our data curation services towards online showcasing. So Ibali is our online or digital showcase platform. You can find it on ibali.uct.ac.za. We use Omeka S as the principal, I guess, software underneath it, and together with a little bit of IIIF in terms of presenting some of our media images. We launched it at the end of 2020. We believe it's among the first such platforms in South Africa. It was the first, I guess, official showcase platform of the university. The name Ibali comes from isiXhosa, which is one of the 11 languages of the country. It means story, and it was selected by our library staff as the name for the platform. The idea being that as you navigate the site, you write your own stories through basically looking through the items in the collections. We have 60 different sites, so about 60 different collections, I guess you can say, with over 77,000 items and about 61,000 pieces of media. Of course, in working on Ibali, we are very much aware of the digital curation workflow. So we kind of handle both aspects in terms of ingesting the material, enhancing it, classifying it, and indexing it, while at the same time trying to maintain the repository to create an exciting presentation layer on top of a kind of useful user experience. I guess to add further to the context, we are positioned within the global south. And I guess whether as a result of that, and this can be argued, we're dealing with a lot of history that is contested, that is multilingual, and really needs a plurality of voices that to replace a kind of master narrative. So when we're working with archives that end up being showcased, we need to acknowledge all the people who did not have agency in the creation of these archives. And that's part of the reason why we are keen on making this dialogue. Also, we are keen to participate in digital humanities as much as possible. But we do have to recognize that we do have some limitations in terms of like technical access and the ability, like the fact that there are no developers that work and we have limited technical scope for it. But what was really important for us in terms of setting up Ibali, that it wasn't just going to be about the content, but about how well the site weaves the content together. So how many useful links and connections that we can build between collections, also within collections themselves by using, of course, metadata. And what we, I guess, really identified within Omeka S is the ability that items on the system can both be media items, but they can also be more unique items such as people, places, and events. And the ability of Omeka S to then to interlink these to highlight the fact that if a person has made an artwork that sits in a particular place, that place can also have another artwork that connects to another person, and we can kind of trace the link all through that. And that was important for us to be aware of when setting up the first sites and the kind of mission for the platform, which was really to showcase the digital objects of the university in a structured manner, So making sure that all the collection items are enhanced with metadata. It was also important for us that it was housed under one university umbrella, because before this, researchers and people with collections would just create their own sites. So this was kind of a central place to put everyone together. And then we really wanted to kind of encourage a participation in the semantic web and to stop people from looking at it as just websites, but to actually look at it as more visual databases. And in all of this, if that wasn't ambitious enough, we also wanted to make sure, or kind of build a platform that would allow users and research groups to actually build the work themselves without people at the library being a bottleneck, and say like, we can't cope with all the work that we have. So I guess I just want to show you a quick example of one such collection. This is a theater collection, a theater project that's been developing for 5 years. They've been putting on different productions, and they've been putting on the media related to their production development, which has been, enhanced to identifying the people and linking it with all the cross-referenced videos and footage that they're involved in. And there's about 5 or 4 productions that one can navigate through and watch the various videos and look at keywords and explore basically this rich archive of a theater project. In terms of setting everything up, one of the big things, I guess, that we encountered was how can we balance creating a structure that kind of can go throughout the whole platform, but also give users a freedom to be able to kind of create, not necessarily their own material, but freedom to describe things as they wish. And that's kind of where the dialogue came in as a kind of key principle for us, that while we're building the showcase site, we are creating a dialogue between the past and the present. We're creating a dialogue between the archive and the community that it might showcase as part of it. Of course, between the curator and the end user who's visiting it. And because of South Africa's history, we're kind of creating a dialogue across many different languages, communities, and cultures. All of these things which you need to be aware of. And then, of course, I guess the final technical dialogue is between the data that we have and the various linked open data resources that exist around the world, of which we want to be able to connect with. And I guess that whole journey over the last 4 years has been, what technologies and processes can we use to make this dialogue, all these levels of dialogues, function. So some startup steps that we decided with is we kind of wanted to standardize templates for metadata capture and to use, of course, the many recognized ontologies that also come through Omeka S. So we defined kind of templates for both media and non-media objects as standardized templates that we encouraged everybody to use as they were building their own site. And while we were doing that, we immediately identified certain metadata fields and leveraged the use of linked open data to be able to connect to those and kind of set those as defaults for people to, pre-select options as opposed to kind of doing a free text. At the same time, we said, well, if you still want to describe things your own way, you can take our basic template and add on metadata fields that you wish, of course, with our consultation, but it means you don't change the kind of data fields that we have set up, because that should work across the whole platform. And of course, one of the key things was trying to figure out how much linked data and, well, basically how much of the semantic web we can use doing this as much as possible. An early example of this is, and I put this example because of yesterday's talk about, this is an open educational resource library on climate change. And they went through a very detailed metadata capturing and formatting of resources for teachers and learners about climate change, but they even went as far to identify what sustainable development goal each resource aligns itself with. And we had to basically, I guess it wasn't the best practice, but had to borrow metadata fields in order to be able to accommodate that. I'm going to share some of the key modules. Of course, Omeka S is quite a modular piece of open source, and you can keep adding different modules. And I'm going to share 3 that have made a big difference for us. Of course, the one module, which is fairly straightforward, but makes a big difference, is the ability to set your own kind of controlled vocab, which is called custom vocab. And we've used it quite a lot, even internally, And this is a collection about the Omani community, which were the first people to live in the Kalahari. And this is an ongoing work where researchers keep adding more material. But because of the number of people that they're referencing and the places, we have basically, created controlled vocab lists for them so that as they're developing more metadata and capturing it, we're ensuring that it's staying consistent and allowing people to keep searching it in a more organized way. And this includes keywords and people as well. Of course, we've also used the one where we link to linked open data vocabularies that exist already. That was a key one that forms part of the process. And we even had an interesting example where we not only took the more traditional one, but found other kind of endpoints we could connect to. So we have a site which is called the Percival Kirby Musical Instruments. It's a collection of musical instruments that sit within the university. And we found that the metadata had, and I'm going to pronounce this so wrong, and I know that I'm in the wrong context to do this, the horn, bostel, and sax identifiers for musical numbers. There is a vocab or an ontology that kind of, an ontology, a linked open data endpoint for this that we found a way to connect with, so that basically for each instrument, when we put kind of the relation of what it's related to, we could link back to the actual vocab. And that was one of the key parts to what we're trying to do. And now I'll share some of the challenges and cases that we have looked at. So this first case is the concordant case of names in different languages. And this basically dealt with how do we present multilingual properties of items. So the situation goes as follows, that an item, which could be in most cases like a person or a place, could have different names in different languages. And how do we kind of present that? Do we use a single metadata field with different language codes, even if those language codes kind of don't exist anymore? Or do we find a way to use multiple metadata fields to ensure that basically each language is presented in its own way? Omeka S does come with multilingual support. So anytime you add a piece of metadata, you can specify what language it is, and that works quite great. You, of course, have these ontologies that you can draw from. And this is kind of where we started getting a bit more creative, I guess, because we would use templates to set up to identify people, but we would kind of borrow from different properties from different ontologies to accommodate the fact that, for example, an individual could have a first name, a last name, but could also have a traditional name, could have a nickname, a second surname. And we wanted to include all of that to be presented because in the case of a lot of communities, all these names have slightly different meanings and connotations and are part of the person's identity. But with these vocabularies or ontologies, we also kind of took it a step up by actually creating our own, because we wanted to really figure out a way to highlight the different languages that we're going to keep reusing as much as possible. So in this particular case, we were trying to, we created an ontology that had some of the endangered languages that had been, or the dialects that had been categorized in 1956 by one of the researchers, Bleak, at the time. And we created this ontology that sits on our Ibali showcase system. And this was really to kind of accommodate the fact that we have one key site which has a list of animals that are indigenous to the country, of course, but to highlight the many different names that or names in the different languages for this particular animal. And you can kind of see that on our Sand and Core Center archive, where they are presented. And by clicking on the cheetah, no, sorry, not the cheetah, the hyena, you can kind of see it presented in all the different languages, but we're also including a link back to kind of a more central linked open data resource at the same time. That's one way we looked at that. Then the confounding case of not quite duplicate items is how to deal with sites that want to describe the same item, but in their own way. So in this case, we might have a same non-media or even media item that basically kind of, it needs to be this, every site wants to describe it slightly differently. They have metadata fields. And this kind of highlights one of the key parts of Omeka S is while you have resources on one side, which have a number of different items, when you create a site, you can reuse the one item in many different sites as you wish, which is both a blessing and I guess a curse in a way, because I want to give you an example. So this is a place, it's called Swartkop. It's in Afrikaans, which is one of the other languages of the country. It means Black Hill, but we have 3 different collection sites that make reference to it and describe it completely differently, even though technically it has the same geographic coordinates. So this is one of the Omani archive that has it, which is about the community. We have a researchers who are interested in rock art and presenting research around that describes it slightly differently. And then we have a digitized version of a book that was put on as part of the San and Khoi archive, and it describes it differently as well. So we were looking at, well, what do we do in this case? Is it a case of, option 1, creating a kind of very neutral, lowest common data item on the platform, and then allowing every different site to create their own description of it, and just using, for example, is version of as a metadata field to link back to that neutral item on the site. And in this way, it allows people to see the interconnections between the sites. Or is it simpler to actually just have each site describe it as they wish, but to include one specific metadata field, such as location, to link it back to something like GeoNames or Wikidata that has that place connected to it? And this is something that we still quite haven't settled on, because we see the pros and cons on both. And we kind of like the fact that you can see items across, but we also recognize that certain people's sites don't want to have conflicting metadata or metadata from another site being presented on it. And the last case that I'm going to share with you is the convincing case for creating interpretive curation sites. So how do we create a space that allows researchers to present a showcase site as part of their thesis? So they kind of want to create something a site that uses structured data, but they kind of want to be expressive with their metadata or quite playful. And one of the ways that we've done that is to actually demarcate a special space, which we call the curator's corner. And this came about because we recognize that because it's a showcase site, it doesn't have to be an official representation of a collection, that these sites can actually be used to make arguments, to make creative exploration on something that already exists. And in this case, the user can use a number of different types of material, whether it's on our system or something outside, to present an argument. And this argument then is actually interesting because it's actually using semantic methodologies to kind of push forward this argument. And that's something that we really find interesting within our space and part of digital humanities. So this particular example is the medicine chest. It was made by a PhD student at the time, which looks, Dr. Lina Liebenberg. She looked at a particular object that was sitting in the library archives, this medicine chest, and then constructed a series of lesson plans in order how to bring this medicine chest into a curriculum. But she used a number of different other media items to kind of make her point. And she was identifying and classifying it with her own resonances and keywords so that people could kind of navigate her way of thinking through playing around with the site as well. But that does bring up continuing challenges with this, is how do we separate the metadata in these sites from the collection showcase sites, especially if we're considering exposing our site to kind of external aggregators? How do we reference or cite items from collection showcases and sites from the curator's corner? So how do people who want to comment on the material that we already have, how do we reference that in the site without with leaving the kind of central version alone? And the ongoing negotiation around ethics from reproducing media from other sites. So all of these challenges kind of continue. It's kind of part physical, part technological kind of debates that kind of go on. But we're also looking at how the tool itself has developed and grown over time and what we can use. such as the fact that it's now embedded that there's value annotation added to the Omeka system so that you can make comments, of course, on the metadata that you're doing, so you can replicate it, sorry. It's interesting in the explanation, they say, the point of this is to make ambiguous statements more concrete. And yet for us, it feels like, well, this is actually to make the concrete statements more ambiguous and to actually question and challenge them so that the user who's looking at the site can actually see the dialogue happening between the archive and the present, for example, at the moment. There's a number of different other modules that we're going to look at using, including annotating the whole record as well as adding modules that allow the public to comment and contribute more directly than just sending in a form, which we already have active on most sites. And that is kind of what I guess our ongoing philosophy is, to kind of keep the dialogue open in this curation and showcasing space, to embracing the software developments. And I think this just attending this conference so far has been interesting to look at the leaps that other institutions have taken in terms of this. And for us also, how we can speed up the putting stuff on the showcase sites to the automation and I guess to the software developments. And always establishing, I guess it's important for us that what we put online does keep creating more dialogues with the community that it's kind of showcasing or presenting. So we're really kind of decolonizing what the university archives have set up to do. And all of this, I guess, is part of our thing, that as we're building, as we're making collections and showcasing them, we're also building connections. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjin. That was so interesting. I can tell that as a fellow Omeka S developer or user. So, but we don't have 60 sites, but we also have some. So I feel everything you said. I have to say that.
Nice, thanks.
I haven't seen any questions in the chat, but I actually have a lot. But also like which modules you exactly used and so on, but maybe we can also discuss this later because I guess it is very detailed. Did you implement modules on your own as well?
You mean, have we developed our own?
Yes.
No, we haven't. We just don't have that, I guess, technical capacity. I think we have, like over the 4 years, we have gained an understanding of how modules work and how we can adjust them, but we haven't developed our own. But what seems to be encouraging, that the community is quite big, and it feels like whenever we think of, oh, this would be useful to have, 3 months down the line, I see a module that does almost exactly that.
Yeah, definitely. That's also my feeling when it comes to that. But this is so good to see also what you can do already with the modules that exist, that you can still go so far and create so many sites that work really well. So yeah, very impressive job. But I still don't see any other questions, and we are a bit behind our time. So I guess we will move to the next speaker, and I will write to you in the forum later with all questions.
Thank you very much.